Hi, my name is Jordan Wilson. I'm on the board of the CFA Society Saskatchewan, and tonight we're here to talk a little bit about women in finance. Joining me tonight are Veronica Gamracy. Veronica is a portfolio manager and investment advisor with CIBC World Markets in Saskatoon. Veronica has over 35 years experience serving a clientele of affluent individuals, institutions, and corporations. Education-wise, Veronica actually has a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Studio Art and Masters in Business Administration from McGill, in International and Corporate Finance, and a Chartered Financial Analyst designation. Veronica also holds Certified Investment Management Analyst and Certificate in Performance Measurement. So a very well-rounded background. Juliana Wong is a Senior Capital Markets Director at Concentra Bank in Regina. She manages Concentra's funding pricing through wholesale market, indirect channels, and capital markets. As well, Juliana oversees liquidity in terms of portfolio investments, cash management, and the management of credit facilities. Prior to working at Concentra, Juliana worked with a pension investment firm and an asset management company. Juliana graduated from the University of British Columbia with a Bachelor of Arts in Mathematics and Economics, and she's a CFA charter holder. She joined the CFA Society Board of Directors in 2015 and is currently its Vice President. Our final guest is Robin Koroluk. Robin is a Senior Wealth Advisor and Portfolio Manager at Scotia Wealth Management in Saskatoon, where she provides guidance and solutions to high net worth individuals, corporations, and foundations to meet their wealth management goals. Robin received a Bachelor of Commerce degree in 2010 from the University of Saskatchewan and her CFA charter in 2017. Robin joined the CFA Society Saskatchewan in 2018 and chairs the Women in Finance and Saskatoon Dinner Committees. Robin recently became a mom and has been juggling her career and young family over the last year, all to great success. So welcome, ladies. And I think it's an interesting dynamic because Veronica has 35, 37 years experience in industry. Juliana started work in 2006, so about 15 years. And Robin, about 10, 11 years. So kind of a mix of what we've seen out there. The first question is kind of just sort of an introduction. And we'll start with Juliana. The world keeps changing. So I'm curious, how has the industry, as far as women participation or opportunities, changed in your experience, whether it be at an asset management company or now at Concentra?
Well, I guess it has changed in a way that there is more participation in terms of women in particularly front office role, and I'm also seeing that in the banking side as well, where a lot of the sales and traders that I deal with, they are also, there's a lot of women and it's quite diverse in terms of the workforce. But outside of that, what I'm seeing is that, the skill set is evolving. Definitely, it has gotten a lot more complex in terms of instruments and solution. So as a result, I'm seeing the people that I mainly transact with, they have a very technical background. So rarely do you see someone as simple as just accounting degree. Now it could be PhD in astrophysics. So that's where it's kind of evolving to.
And you think perhaps that there's more women that come from more variety of backgrounds and that creates more opportunities?
Exactly.
Okay. Now, Veronica, you've been sort of 35 years in the industry. You've seen all the changes. Probably when you started out, I know when we talked before, you were, I think, the second CFA in Saskatoon.
First.
And there were very few, if any, women in the entire province. So what have you seen over the last 35 years as far as more women being interested or more opportunities coming along in the finance or investment side?
Well, I certainly think there's more women. As I've mentioned before, I think it's disappointing that the progress, even though there has been progress, has been slower than perhaps I would like. I've given this some thought. I do think that when it comes to certain areas, such as the area that Rob and I are in sort of the advisory area, which is so much about relationships in addition to sort of the obvious financial knowledge, women, I think, are doing a bit better. But when it comes to other areas in finance, sort of the more quantitative areas, the more institutional areas, say like, mergers, acquisitions, IPOs, they're still very much largely male dominated. So we are making some progress in areas where, perhaps we have a bit of an advantage, but we're still fairly poorly represented in my view.
Okay. And I think Veronica makes a great point on how actually what Robin and Veronica do is really, to me, less about the technical expertise, and it's more about the hand-holding, the soft skills to build the trust and the relationships. And to me, that would be something that, just again, intuitively, I would feel that a woman would be in many ways stronger than men as far as that soft side. What are your thoughts, Robin?
Yeah, I think, if we're really looking at it just from that perspective, women would probably be better, or, tend to have a bit of a softer side and more caring side. But I think the trajectory to get there is really where the obstacle stands with that career. In my current role, or probably in Veronica's as well, we're seeing a lot more women in the administrative roles rather than call it the advisory roles, just because it does tend to require a bit more experience, maybe a bigger time commitment, likely be a bit more challenging to your work-life balance, which could be where women tend to take more of the burden on at home. So that's just my thoughts.
Now, just to follow up with that, because you made 2 points that are interesting to me, is that one is that women maybe go more into the administrative side. Now, what I would probably like to see if I was running a bank where you work, for example, at Scotia, is creating better pathways so that if you do come in on the administration side, there's internal courses, or there's mentoring, or there's something that says, okay, year 1 you're here, but year 5 we want to turn you into something different, should you so want. So to me, that's something that I'd be interested in, both, especially Veronica and Robin's. I know the banks don't do a great job of that today, but I think that's an opportunity if they truly want to build more women up as far as senior people go.
I think they're very different silos. I think one doesn't necessarily lead to the other, and I would just sort of comment about your mentioning how women have perhaps better soft skills. I'd say we have both. You can't undermine the technical stuff. The competence is there. I think we have both better than men, but the competency really matters as well. And in my experience, the thing is, if you start in admin, you can become, and there is a pathway to becoming senior admin, but not to go into the brokerage advisory side. You'd have to really claw your way to that. The banks do not facilitate that. It's not a natural progression. They're very different areas.
But is that something, we're the CFA Society, and we're supposed to be advocating for our members and to build the industry and build the membership. Is that something that CFA Institute should do a better job or increased job to try to create these better pathways for people that do want to come in at a junior level and then progress?
I think you can educate people. You can educate young women to say, you know, I mean, we've had conversations before, so you know my viewpoint. I would say if you're serious about being sort of an advisory or in a management point of view, do not go into admin. Don't even start there.
So I think you were sort of unique, Robin, from the people that I know, but that's the path you went in. Mm-hmm. But I suspect, you know, sort of knowing you on a personality level, that you probably accepted the position with the proviso that there was more to it than just getting stuck in a lower end position for the next 10 years.
Yeah, when I went into my first interview, it was about I wanted to be here, but that wasn't available today. So I took what I could get and I proved myself. So every 6 months I was asking for more and wanting more, and I just I kept clawing my way, as Veronica mentioned. But I do think it's hard for lots of women to do that, maybe starting at a bit higher of a level, if you want to call it different levels, would be better to start there, because then you're given the opportunity to learn a bit quicker. Like my trajectory, although might have been a quick learning curve in my perspective, was still quite slow from a typical career path. So it took me about 5 years or so.
I just find, to me, I find that interesting, because my background personally is anyone that I hire, I want to have a multi-year plan. I don't want to hire someone that can do the job on day one because they get bored, they leave. I want to hire people that we can keep moving up the ladder because we're investing in them. It takes money.
And I think, you could start as, say, a junior advisor, learning from a senior advisor, going to meetings, learning the ropes kind of thing. And you're not going to have the skill set you need to be a really good advisor for still several years, but you could be doing that job.
So again, part of the onus is on the individual when they're applying to sort of, I know it's tough when you're applying for a job, you just want the job and get your foot in the door, but you should probably try to explain that you don't want to be an admin person forever. Here are your aspirations.
Exactly.
And I think the difficulty, Veronica, is that you don't know what you don't know, because you like to say that. So you may not know what your potential could be, and that sort of leaves trying to find mentors and people that can help you.
Right, and I think also we talked a bit about how, again, my experience is probably a little bit different because things have changed. But if you would go into most places even now, if you're a woman, you see that admin people are generally women, and the advisors and institutional work are generally male. So it would be very hard, and it was very hard as a woman to say, I want to be on that side, where you're the only one of your kind. That's always been a problem. So even if you do know, it's a little bit difficult, and it still is.
Okay. So if we turn to Juliana, who's more in a corporate side with a paycheck and maybe more traditional finance career. And I think one of the issues that we see out there is this perception of the wage gap between men and women. And I'm just curious, every moderate to large company has a human resources department. So people that are doing the same work will be getting the same pay, plus or minus their experience, because everything's in bands these days. So the question is, the difference in wages tends to be different jobs. And so how do you get people, again, in your side, on more of a corporate finance side, how did you move up your ladder? Because you're relatively senior in your area, correct?
Yeah, I think so. And just going back to what Veronica said earlier, you don't know what you don't know. So I guess just right off the bat, after graduating from university, you look for opportunity that gives you a good foundation, but have the potential to move beyond the current analyst role. And so that's what I looked for at the beginning. and so that's how I progressed from there. But in terms of salary gaps, there is a bit, but I think it starts also at your first job as well, and this practice is frowned upon in some countries where they offer your salary based on your previous salary. So technically you're not supposed to ask that, but then when you start off as a junior role, as a administrative assistant, they ask your salary, and that compounds your future negotiation. And so it definitely starts from the beginning, from my view.
No, I think that's right. When I was at UBS, the trick was that you were in the salary band and you were stuck there. So that was based on what you negotiated on day one. So then you go across the street to Credit Suisse for 2 or 3 years, where you get that pay bump, and then you come back to UBS in 3 or 4 years and you get the pay bump again. And it drove people crazy that stayed with one bank or the other, because the guys that went across the street with no loyalty made more money when they came back. And that's just the game. But you also, I think when you come into a business, you want the job, definitely, but you got to understand your value. Mm-hmm. And if you take too little, as Juliana said, on day one, and again, it doesn't matter if you're male or female, mm-hmm. then you're stuck in that band, and it's hard to move up except for, say, cost of living allowance. So, fight for things. And as I like to tell people, mm-hmm. non-monetary compensation, education, extra vacation, because the bands are quite tight on what you can pay monetarily, but there is flexibility in other areas. So the parking pass, those sort of things. So I'm curious with you, like your group, I think your group is relatively small, but you report to a lady, I think.
That's correct.
What's sort of the makeup of your organization, male, female, and it seems like women, given that you are the two top people, have good opportunities?
Yeah, for sure. I would say, I'm really fortunate to report to a lady, because there's not a lot of female treasurer out there in Canada for small, mid-sized banks. In fact, she might be the only one out there. That's an exception. However, within my area, if you talk about treasury or on the other side, the asset side, there is more men out there. And as what we mentioned earlier, the back office, if you will, or middle office, currently there is more women in those type of role at the moment.
But within Concentra, if a woman's in a back office role or a junior role, say, is this company structured in such a way that there's advancement opportunities beyond, say, what Robin or Veronica were talking about, where you're maybe stuck in admin forever?
So currently, the way how it's structured is the path is you can go up in other area that is related to perhaps operation, but if you're saying that, like, can someone move from operation to the front office facing role, currently there isn't anything in place.
Interesting.
And that's actually, that's common with the banks. And like, if I wanted, like, I was relatively senior at UBS, and you had to get exposure in different organizations, and you can't get that as much if you're in that pure client-facing role, because it's got value and it's got certain skill sets, whereas I could sort of move into risk management, I can move into operations, so you're a little bit more flexible, and that's what they sort of want at the higher levels, is understanding of all the different units. The one question, and I can't remember what your answer was when we did our one-on-one session, Juliana, but I think all of you were the same, is that, and you touched on that, is I'm sure you said something about don't narrow yourself in as far when you come out of school, give yourself opportunities and various doors to open, so you're not boxing yourself in one direction. And I think all three of you mentioned that in our one-on-ones. So is that something that you think is also important for young people, not just women, that give themselves as many opportunities so that they can move sideways or diagonally if they see a better opportunity?
For sure, yeah, that would be my recommendation. At the end of the day, you can control what you can control. The industry is evolving at the end of the day. I always I like the motto, take the path of least resistance in a way. So just go with the flow.
And I think in Robin's case, when we talked, if memory serves, you actually waited a few years to start your CFA, and you built up, Canadian Securities Institute type courses and internal courses because you wanted a fallback position if the CFA wasn't the right move for you. So that's why you have your insurance and all that stuff.
Yeah.
Is that accurate?
My focus going into the career at first was just get my courses that I need to do my day-to-day job, and then the CFA kind of was something I decided to do just based on creating opportunities, because I wasn't sure if that was going to be the role for me, because it was 2 years into a career that I enjoyed what I was doing. I was learning a lot, but I wanted to continue my trajectory into something I could see myself doing long term. So the CFA really opens doors and allows you to move globally, really, which I liked.
And then Veronica is actually backwards from that, I think, from our conversation. She started off in the film industry and ended up getting, if my memory serves, getting her MBA because of her need to do the office work.
To have a business background, yeah.
And so, can you touch on that a bit more?
Well, I can, but I wanted to back up because it just occurred to me. Again, we're sitting here in Saskatoon. As we know, there's a big difference. If you're in Toronto and you're working for a bank or a credit union and you get a CFA, you'll probably get a position as an analyst or whatever. Mm-hmm. I think it's really kind of brave for anybody out in the prairies or a smaller town like a CFA, because it's not really clear what you're going to do with it.
That's right.
Because to be an advisor of the CFA is relatively novel, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is very early on. We think it's great.
Mm-hmm.
I think the Institute thinks it's great. I think it's the way of the future.
Yeah.
But it's not the traditional use of the CFA.
That's right.
And we knew, all of us,
yeah,
right, that if we lived here, we were never going to be equity analysts or, Paula, there was 1 in a million who can do that out here. But otherwise, we were all stepping into the unknown, right?
Yeah.
And kind of going, so what can you do with this, right?
Yeah.
No, just
what, though, I do think, just really quickly, sorry, I do think, though, it has opened doors in the industry. Your like my confidence, for instance, was boosted significantly.
But we didn't know that at the time.
Exactly.
You're probably, it sounds funny. You're going to go, you think this is interesting. It sounds like it's a good credential.
Right.
You've heard about it.
Yeah.
We joked last time about how did I even find out? That was when you used to get the print Globe and Mail and you'd leaf through it, and
you're very brave. Let's be honest.
So it's a very different way to do things. Like again, and if we were in Toronto, New York, we'd know lots of people, we'd know lots of jobs, we'd be told to get it.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think any of us were told to get it, right? We got it on our own, and then it becomes part of who we are. So
I want to follow up on that, and then I'll come back because I do want to hear about the MBA and how you
and the film industry.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I find that interesting, and since it's my mic, you have to listen to me. But I think an issue with the CFA designation, I've always moaned and complained. I think it's a poor title, Chartered Financial Analyst. And I think what surprises people going into levels 1 especially is, holy smoke, this curriculum is accounting, it's economics, it's ethics.
Statistics.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like it's so much broader. And so that's a surprise for people coming in because they're not really aware of truly how diverse the skill sets you have to learn. But again, that's something that we need to target the institutions that hire. For example, next semester I'm teaching a course in economics. I learned so much about economics, macroeconomics, in the CFA program. But that's not what you think. So I'm curious, I know in your world, we've talked about this before, you coming out of economics and a mathematics background, Juliana, that's really helped you in your work and in attaining the CFA. Is that right?
Yes, that is correct. Yeah.
That's all I'm going to get out of you.
Sorry.
And I think with Robin and Veronica is, yeah, it's financial analyst, but a lot of the skill sets that you learned in the program are wealth management skills and working with clients. And you've added what's becoming my favorite certificate, the CIPM.
Yeah.
These are sort of things that you can get through the CFA Institute that help you as an investment advisor or a portfolio manager.
Mm-hmm.
And did either of you know, like when you went into the program, that opened the door in so many different directions?
Well, I'd be curious because, when I think about it, I think, I had just sort of heard about it, that it would be good if I'm going to be in this profession. But the curriculum was news to me as well. When you first get it, you do go, wow. Like it is a lot, and it is very varied. And I didn't know anybody who had a CFA, so I didn't, you don't know what you're getting into, but you're kind of committed once you write the check. Right? So, but did you know?
See it through. No, no, but the nerd in me loved it.
Probably a good thing we didn't know.
And you know what? Just having that, I always say just knowing a little bit about everything is so important, because then it gives you the ability to go and find more information.
Well,
so
it's a generalist degree.
Exactly.
Or a credential.
Yeah.
And it's something that I think, again, we've harped on in all the career chats and then in our presentations, is that you don't need to be a finance major to become a CFA. I mean, I think having the economics or the mathematics like Juliana was a huge advantage. I came out of a chartered accounting background. Huge advantage.
Yeah,
Fine arts,
studio
art.
art.
Your analysis of Picasso's didn't...
I remember hearing the credit and debit, like that was a tough one.
So brave.
I remember going like this and kind of going credit to the left, debit. Like it's just, if it's on the left, it was just otherwise, anyway.
Now,
but you learn.
Something we didn't talk when you and I talked was, like, I find that a lot of the higher net worth clients that you deal with, and we talked about this before, is that I've become an expert on agriculture. I know how the crop is coming in because a lot of your clients are involved in that. But at this stage of your life, all the boards that you've been on and all your knowledge about fine art, people like to travel. Clients like to travel. They like visiting the Louvre. They like visiting the Prado. So I bet you that your background from way back then probably adds some value in your client discussions just on a personal side.
Well, who knows? I think it's all about, even though, it is about relating, and I think that's something that, male or female, if you're good at it, it certainly helps in this job, to be able to relate to a variety of people. And I think we've talked about this maybe in the last podcast, but I've certainly come to find out that it's really never about the money, right? It's about everything else. And, that's life and that's travel and having a wide background. It's all good, right? I mean, it's, you don't get too much closer to people, I think, than in our business. Not maybe a doctor, but if you have a good relationship with a client, you know everything. You know everything.
What is it about, if it's not about the money?
It is about, just go through a few estates or divorces. It is about love and hate and greed and envy and respect and gratitude and legacy. It's all about that. And sometimes it's revenge and anger. It's about all of that. And it all gets funneled through money.
I don't think she's talking about the advisor's revenge.
I don't know, maybe you not so much, right?
Yeah, not so much in our business.
Would you agree with that? Because you're laughing over there, Robin.
Yeah.
Just tack on another 20 years and say, like, I've known some of my clients for 35 years.
Yeah.
I have seen them through.
They're looking for that reliable person they can call when they have a question. And I always say, call me with any question, whether it's financial or not.
Yeah. And to me, I agree with Veronica's, like the vast array, but to me it always comes down to trust.
For sure.
And that's sort of your comment about the doctor.
And if I can pass on an anecdote, because I thought it was good. I'm training an associate, And you know how in our business you chart everything to file and charts about everything. And so we're reviewing client files, and he looks at the charts and he kind of goes, that's it? Like, it's 10 years and you've got... And I said, yeah, pretty much. And he's like... And I said, you know what? But I'm like Aaron Brockovich. I've been dealing with him for 30 years and it's only me. Like, in some places, maybe it's you for a couple of years. Like at a bank, you have to leave very exhaustive files because you're only around for a while. The relationship moves. I said, I've known these people for over 30 years. I know everything, but it's here.
Yeah.
Which, you know, has some flaws. But I said, it's not that I don't know that. It's just, why would I write it down? I'm the advisor. I'll be talking to them tomorrow and in a month and a year.
Right.
So, you know, but it's interesting. It's a very different kind of relationship, right?
And I think that, to me, that's a mistaken relationship. Like, if I'm the bank and I come from the management side, I don't want my client advisors and I don't want my investment advisors having that personal relationship, in the sense that Veronica walks across the street to the next branch and she brings all her clients, because the loyalty is with her. It's not with CIBC. And I think that's been a mistake in the past couple of decades with the major banks or the major financial institutions, is who controls the client relationship. And that's always been a battle. And if I was...
That's why they have cross-selling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's kind of...
And I don't think if you don't give the advisor the opportunity to build that relationship, to build that trust, you know, the client might not stick around anyway. So I think that's a risk they have to take.
Yeah, it's a tough one. So now, going back again, we're not going to avoid your fine arts, film to the MBA and then the CFA. Like, how did that, I mean, we went through that, how you progressed, but how did the CFA, or I guess first the MBA, which is quite similar in many aspects, help run your business, or, you know, operate? Because that was more running a business, it wasn't the client advising aspect.
Yeah, I mean, I wanted the MBA, and I think I mentioned this simply because I didn't have any business or economic or any kind of background like that. And rather than going back and getting a BCom, which, you know, I mean, the MBA was the degree of the day. So that provided me with, you know, I mean, some pretty, you know, general solid background when it came to economics, accounting. And I did take a lot of portfolio management courses. I was just sort of drawn to that area and decided that I would like to pursue work in that area, and did. And then after, for me, it was 10 years after I'd been working, you realize that, you know, doing that and doing the CSI courses, you know, it's pretty rudimentary. And if you want to compete and do a better job, there's a better designation, and that was the CFA. So.
And as we talked about before, the CFA is a little bit more focused on the finance side, whereas the MBA is a little bit broader on operational and marketing and those sort of things.
And the MBA, you're giving up a couple of years of, you know, employment to do that. The CFA, by this point, you know, I was solidly sort of, you know, beginning, mid-career, and, you know, you can juggle both at the same time. So. Okay.
The next question is interesting because Juliana was the president of CFA Saskatchewan last year, and she's currently the vice president. Robin heads the Women in Finance Initiative, and Veronica is the Saskatchewan representative on the CFA Canada. So heavily involved in society stuff. Now, CFAI out of the US puts a heavy emphasis on diversity. Diversity matters, women in finance. And I'm curious, do you think that their initiatives are working? And if so, what are they doing well, and what areas could they do more to promote women in finance? And we'll start with Robin because she's thinking about it a bit.
I'm thinking really hard. I think they've been trying very hard to make a difference. I think it needs to come from all angles: employers, CFA Institute, universities, high schools. But I think the biggest factor that has been discounted is that you do need to ensure that your role models, or, well, not like an employer or the CFA Institute needs to ensure role models or other family and friends are also involved in those decisions, because these children or young adults or young women who are going into careers, sometimes they're only being exposed to maybe one or two things. Doesn't mean they won't change their career down the road, but it's a bit harder to do. And I think just education early on is really where it needs to happen. And I don't know if the CFA Institute is getting to those particular groups.
And I have to like tip the hat to you because you've led the initiatives to go out to the high schools and do careers in finance, not just CFA, but just general careers and sort of options for high school students when they're thinking about it. Do they want to go post-secondary? And also heavily at the university level to, again, because as Veronica pointed out, Saskatchewan especially doesn't have that pure finance. Mm-hmm. It's not Toronto, it's not even Calgary. So you may not know anybody that's gone through the programs or has jobs.
Right.
So we'll turn to Juliana, like over your time as sort of on the executive in Saskatchewan, what do you think of how CFAI is doing as far as promoting, getting more women in the program and creating jobs when they come out?
I think they're doing a pretty good job, but I guess there might be, from my perspective, there needs to be more buy-in from employers, and I know this might be a low-hanging fruit, but really get employees buy-in from the entry level and maybe perhaps beyond that as well, right? Like be in the university campus, talk to the first year, second year students, get them interested even at STEM perhaps. You don't have to be a finance major, and so that's how you get some of the talent going through that they can potentially even give an interview. That's sort of my perspective, because at this point when some of the resume comes through, like out of 50 there's probably like 3 female and the rest are guys, so they're not even applying for the job. So that would be my perspective, is to target university students and make sure they have the proper skill set to evolve with the industry.
Now, when you came out with the mathematics and the economics, you didn't even realize that CFA was a career option for you at the time.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, when I was in the university, I actually studied actuarial exams instead. CFA wasn't really in my radar per se.
And I think that's equally true when I talked with Dan, who's got his master's of economics. He just kind of stumbled into the CFA as an option. It wasn't something his economics profs. And so sort of on that point with what Juliana's saying is that this year we're going to try to do more outreach to the engineering faculty, for example, because we've got a board member who's a CFA engineer. We're going to reach out more to the economics groups. And again, it's that more education that having an economics background dovetails well. So those are, I think, good things.
And I would say even earlier, even high school, because by university often the mindset or the curriculum was already set and people are sort of wedded to the idea of accounting or whatever. I think really grade 9 or 10, when people are potentially more open, is a really good time to look at that. And even then, I know it's tough, but I think you have to get to people earlier.
And that's the thing, I think the Institute maybe needs to involve the societies more, because they're more the hands-on on board of helping with this.
No, I think working with the high schools, especially the guidance counselors, your feedback has been very good as far as...
Because there's nothing like it in the high schools. There's nothing, which, we haven't reinvented the wheel. We're just talking about finance and what it is and what it could be for individuals. So I think it's something that's evolving in the curriculum. Like finance is one of those things that is now being talked about, and they're trying to figure out how to bring it into the curriculum. So I think this might be something eventually that's going to be part of every day, but for now I think we just need to do our part.
And I think on that note, a couple of the sessions that we did, the future of finance and growth industries. I think, again, you hate to generalize because that's kind of silly, but it's the softer skills like ESG is becoming huge issue. There's an ESG certificate, environment, social issues, governance. And again, that opens the door to people that may not have a pure interest in number crunching or quote unquote financial analysis. But if you're interested in saving the environment or social awareness, those type issues, which again, from maybe a stereotypical side is more appealing to women, then those are growth industries, and we're going to need people that have interest in that or backgrounds in that. I can teach anyone how to crunch numbers, but I can't teach them environmental or social stuff. So we're going to need to bring in people from those fields to become CFAs if we're going to serve that market. Any thoughts on sort of the growth areas, Veronica, and how that might work?
I think it's a matter of just being flexible, as Juliana mentioned before, in terms of, because things change so much. I mean, I personally not a real fan of that area, even though I know it's a big money maker for the Institute. I personally don't really ascribe to that kind of metric because I don't even know how to define it, frankly. I find it very problematic with clients. But, see what happens in 5 years. I mean, who knew we'd be talking about, Bitcoin 10 years ago? I mean, maybe some people did, I didn't, but I mean, it changes, which is fine. I mean, it is, like you said, the terms of the instruments, the things that we work with, the kinds of vehicles that we use and recommend, and it's so different, right? Mm-hmm. So there's room for everything.
Juliana, any thoughts on that? I don't know how that works, like ESG and the sort of the growth industries on your side of the business with Concentra and the capital markets.
Yeah, that's right. So ESG is definitely a hot topic given what's going on. But things are changing really quickly, and I think technology is an interesting area. It's changing really quick. Payment, settlement, Bitcoin, like you mentioned. How things are being ledgered. So operation and technology, I think there's a lot of tremendous opportunity to optimize. That's my view, and ESG as well. Two of the area where I see there could be potentially a lot of growth and just changes in the industry.
Now, we talked a bit earlier, or maybe off camera, about investment advisor or working in that sort of role is more nebulous or vague. Whereas what Juliana's just talking about, the technology side, the ESG side, to me that seems like it's a more defined position. And maybe that's sort of something, to Veronica's point earlier on, sort of the less clear-cut path. Is that something that maybe might be more interesting to people that want that?
Oh, for sure. I think, especially a relatively small center, it's always good to know. I mean, we talked about, again, sort of Yorkton, medicine doctor. The thing is, just because you have a degree designation doesn't mean there's only one path.
Right.
It would be good to know, for example, when I got my BFA, that you could do here is, and especially now, like there's like 20 or 30 different very distinct kinds of opportunities and careers that one can do with that kind of background. And I wish somebody had told me that. And again, so if we say, like, to me, again, an accountant and a lawyer, you have sort of, sectors and subsets that are fairly obvious. I mean, I'm a layperson, but I think that's fairly well known. But for finance, again, it would be great to say, here are some of the options, here are some of the careers, here are some of the places and corporations that employ people in these ways. Mm-hmm. And especially if you're looking at a larger center, then you have even more opportunities, right?
And these are the skill sets
right.
needed.
So that you don't have to, say, join a bank. I mean, that's not your only option. You may see it that if you live in Saskatoon, but it's really not the only thing. If somebody can explain that and, tell people that, then you've got a world of opportunity, right? And then it makes the designation, I think, more valuable and more rewarding and more relevant because you see where the applications are. And I think that's a big miss with the CFA so far because we're new, right?
Yeah.
We're not as old as law as medicine.
Exactly.
So the applications of it are changing and it's quite novel. And in a smaller center, they're not that obvious, right?
Yeah.
Can you add to that at all, Robin? I mean, Veronica hit all the key points.
Very good point explaining where I think our limitations are. As I mentioned already today, it comes down to education and just communication around what those potential roles could be like and what skill sets you need to thrive in those. And, I don't know, just even having a career counselor or someone like you or I or any one of us chatting with these students, just having a point blank conversation of what you enjoy doing. Maybe we could pinpoint, potential careers in finance. And of course you don't want to force people, but just to kind of lay it out.
See, and I think that's something that CFAI has done a poor job at because they haven't had to, is they lay out the road to the designation and then it ends. Here's all the work, here's the research, here's the curriculum, you get your charter, congratulations, goodbye, pay your membership dues. And for people like us, we kind of go, well, now what? Now we're all fortunate we were working in the area and it became an adjunct. But that doesn't happen with law or other areas. I mean, you know exactly where the path goes, and that needs to be developed, I think.
Yeah, and I sort of think that's why, what Robin was saying earlier about, the CFA Institute, and you just said, they do a poor job in this area. I think they do a good job for people that don't need to know. Like, a lot of the CFAI information is geared towards people in larger centers, and it's not geared to people that in Saskatchewan. And again, that's why we've been forced, especially through Robin's initiatives, to do this outreach ourselves and show that it's so much many opportunities and not that traditional.
I just feel that we're not reaching enough people, which that's the hardest part, is just trying to get in more places.
Well, I'm trying to sort of, before we sat down, Veronica mentioned how I talked to Mike Tom, who's the president of CFA Canada.
Executive director.
I was going to say he's not president, executive director. And these are the sort of things that I would like to see them leverage off, because interior of British Columbia or on Victoria, Winnipeg, they have similar issues to us. We should leverage off that and create a program that's Canadian specific where we can do these CFA career chats, which I think are excellent. It was fascinating to learn about Juliana's background, Veronica's background. Not so much your background, Robin, but everyone else's was good.
So entertaining.
Well, but you've already done a good job with the regulators. Like, there have been some inroads. And again, in defense of CFA Canada, it's a very new organization. But, that makes sense. Like I said, we sort of end at the credential.
Yeah.
And, and for a lot of us, you kind of go, I've done it. And you kind of, but then, well, now what? Like, how do you leverage that?
Right.
And
I think, though, that, as much as I do, which isn't, a ton, but I get I just get the feel, like, no one's come out with anything, but when I see an ESG certificate, right, I can see other things coming along where they do say the CFA is the beginning, it's not the end. And I kind of think that that's what they've got to do is say, the world is changing. As you said, 10 years ago, Bitcoin. In the year 2000, we talked about growth industries. There was no Netflix, no Facebook. Google was just starting up. Amazon was just starting up. These are the huge companies today. What's going to be huge in the future? And people have to, react to that and build the skill sets. And one area that you talked about when we met one-on-one was the changing dynamics in the workforce as far as teams. And maybe you can just sort of refresh on that, because again, that's sort of, we need to diversify the teams because we need to draw on other skill sets.
Well, I think first of all, just the evolution of the teams, and I can, given our sort of varying tenures, you came into a team. I'm correct, and you're in a corporate environment, which is kind of de facto team. And I came into the business when everybody kind of ran their, the one-man shop.
Right.
And in terms of diversity, I think the development of the team, which is good on so many levels. I mean, in terms of competencies, efficiencies, client service, advancement, has been very conducive to women, especially.
I was just going to say.
I mean, it was very hard. I mean, I'll throw out that women I've known in the business. I mean, there's no mat leave under my old model. So that in itself, if you talk about why women don't want to enter into the industry, well, that's a big one. With teams, it's better. I'm not saying, it's great.
I was back at work about 6 hours later, but...
But, there are some options now that didn't
For sure.
exist
You have that support,
20
right?
or 30 years ago.
Yeah.
It would have been an impossibility. So that has made a big difference, and it's certainly, to me, I think, the way of the future. Corporations do, encourage it, do facilitate it. It makes a lot of sense for the way, frankly, money is managed, right? So that works out very well. So I think that is a very good sort of model for diversity and sort of competencies, in the workforce. So that's certainly been to the good.
And I think it goes back to the point, Veronica, you had made about women coming into the industry and going, say, into an administrative role. This now gives more opportunities because there is more roles. It's not just an administrative associate and advisor. It's maybe a hybrid role.
And it mitigates the risk.
Exactly.
Because this way you do have some sort of advantages, but you're not taking all the risk of basically running your own business.
Exactly.
Where that can be very troublesome for a lot of people, especially early on. So.
And with Concentra, with what you do there, Juliana, being a more traditional corporate finance group, you've probably had that built-in diversity and teamwork. You're doing your own thing, but you've got the team around you to support, and you've probably had that since day one with you, or is it different?
Yeah, I would say when I joined Concentra, it is quite diverse already. So I think keeping up with a cooperative culture, so that has been quite established already. So I think they're doing a pretty good job in attracting different types of people to the organization.
And I think for all of you guys that when we did our future of finance, the biggest driver for CFAs was the quality of work and the challenge. It wasn't the monetary compensation. And then also very high on the list was creating those team dynamics and having a workplace that you enjoyed working, getting away from the open floor plans. That meant more not to have an open floor plan than monetary compensation. And if this is what companies are seeing that people want, then there should just continue to be a push. And I say should because I come out of a corporate bank world and I know that they're not always the most rational as far as what they do. But again, if we want to hire good people, we need to offer them the maternity leave. We need to offer them, that sort of cross-fertilization. So if you do go off of maternity or you want to take a sabbatical, you've got some assistance there. And it's not just Veronica by herself with maybe one assistant.
Right. Yeah, I think it's
sabbatical.
What is that?
Exactly.
And again, I think in Juliana's case, in that sort of environment, the traditional corporate finance, that's kind of a given. Like to have that, I call it the hit by the bus. Like I don't want any of my staff who can come in and put a gun to my head and say I need a raise or I quit, or they get hit by a bus and suddenly I've got no Veronica to deal with clients that she's had for 35 years. So again, from a corporate side, you do want to create that team buildings aspect. Okay, we'll wrap this up. I want to go around the room, and I know we covered this in the one-on-ones, but we're talking hopefully to a primarily female audience of maybe university students that are curious about careers in finance, and Veronica and Robin do somewhat similar type work, maybe in a different environment, and Juliana comes out of corporate finance. So I'm just curious, like, what sort of advice would you give someone listening to this that's thinking about maybe a CFA, but maybe just a career in finance in general? So we'll start with Juliana.
I think my advice would be, I think you might mention it earlier, is to don't focus on something, and don't purposely go down a path that is too narrow at the beginning. Just take a lot of courses in high school and university. You never know when it becomes handy later on in life. It could be that history course that you take, or that programming course, or the basket weaving. I know you like that.
And chess.
And chess.
And chess.
So that would be my advice.
And on that note, if I was interested, if I'm listening to this and I'm interested in getting into a finance career, what should I consider, or what sort of resources should I look at? CFAI, CFA Saskatchewan?
Yeah, I would definitely. CFA Institute have good resources, CFA Saskatchewan as well, but it really depends, at the local level, Saskatchewan, what type of employers are out there. Or do you want to stay in Saskatchewan? Do you want to work elsewhere? It doesn't have to be Toronto. Do you want to work elsewhere in Australia or Tokyo, in London? Because at the end of the day, with a CFA, you can take it anywhere and it's recognizable.
Now, I don't know if you can answer this question because I'm not sure they're far enough along, but you were somehow involved with a women in finance network that's being built. Last year they had approached, I think, you and Robin about women finance or something, corporate finance.
Women in investment management.
Women in investment management. Is that something that people can look up and get some more information on careers?
Yes, yeah, I believe they do have resources online for students and for people that are interested in a finance career.
And so that's called Women in Investment Management?
That's correct, yep.
Short for WIM.
Yeah.
Okay. So we'll turn to you, Robin. What sort of advice might you have? And bear in mind that you've already prepared a ton of stuff on our website for career advice to young Saskatchewan people that are interested.
I'll never say this enough, but just talk to someone in the industry. I think that's the best thing you can do. Just get, different perspectives. I think, as Veronica mentioned earlier, Saskatchewan's a different market. Again, it doesn't mean you're going to stay here, but if you're even considering medicine or dentistry, let's talk, and maybe you would have an interest in finance. And I think it's just important to explore all your options, because sometimes people do what their parents want them to do, not what they want to do. So just explore your options.
Now, before COVID hit, literally about 3 days after COVID hit, you were going to organize maybe every 3 or 4 months a women's networking event, not strictly for CFAs, but for university students.
Yeah, professionals and university students. Kind of the idea would have been to pair up with a mentor, or just to make those connections so you could talk to people that have been through it, and for the ones that are very early on in their schooling and maybe haven't decided on a major or really what their career path looks like.
And that's something that we may revisit once the world comes back into normalcy again.
Exactly. I think it's important. Sometimes making those connections is probably the hardest part.
Yeah. And I think on the connection side, just as an aside, is I tell young people in general is create an elevator pitch, that 30-second pitch when you're in an elevator with someone impressive like Veronica, and they say, "What's the deal?" And you can give them something succinct, because at these networking sessions, You don't want to talk too long, but you also don't want to, miss out on an opportunity. And even create a small business card with, your email on the back, or create a personal website that has some biographical, definitely have LinkedIn. And that's sort of a good port of call to when you do make those contacts, so people don't walk away. And I've said this at the Edwards School of Business dinners, is you meet these people and you forget them the next day, but the ones that reach out on LinkedIn, I'm still in touch with them. And again, they're the ones that have to reach out to me. I'm not going to stalk them.
Stand out
exactly
from your peers.
So Veronica, any thoughts from you on advice?
Well, try to end on a really positive note, as I'm, again, the longest 10 years I approach my twilight in the business. It's a phenomenal business, and I think one of the things that occurs to me when we talk to high school and university students is it's not obvious. When you think about other professions, we sit at a desk or computer and maybe talk on the phone or email. It looks dull as anything. But when you think about other professions where you can get compensated this well, you have almost no cost to entry other than intellectual, which again, you can be working and get the CFA, you can get other credentials. You don't have to buy a business, a building, a warehouse, dental sort of suites. You get to build a business, you get to personalize it. There's a lot of ways of managing money, of working in finance, and especially again with an advisory service, you have a business, you have a legacy, you have really solid compensation. I don't think there's anything better.
That was a good high note. I was regretting originally leaving you to last.
No, it's when you think again, we all know, people I went to school with who are surgeons and doctors and engineers, and sort of say equivalent education, lots of money put into the businesses, lots of liability, very long hours. And the other thing that people forget about our business is scalable, right? If you're a dentist or a doctor or a chiropractor, you are not scalable. We can work remotely. We can leverage our business. The sky is the limit, and then you can cash in. It's fabulous.
Excellent. That was a good high point. And I want to thank Veronica, Robin, and Juliana for joining me tonight. And I think we actually had a good conversation, and we discussed a fair bit of good points to take away if you're listening to this. And again, we do have the CFA career chats on our website and YouTube channel, where we talk to CFA members in Saskatchewan one-on-one on their careers and education backgrounds. And that can give you some insights on ways forward for yourself. We also have some presentations on our YouTube channel on careers in finance, diversity matters, growth industries, the future of finance. So there's a lot of information that we've been trying to do over the last couple of years, especially with COVID and being unable to go out to the high schools and the universities. So please, if you're listening to this, feel free to check out the other content. And when we do start setting up live events, please come out to meet CFAs or financial professionals in the community and start building your network that way. So thank you, ladies, for your time tonight, and thank you for listening. Have yourself a good night.